And I'm being joined now by our State House insiders, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist, and Kirk Randazzo, a professor over at USC, political science professor with the University of South Carolina. Kirk, let's begin with you tonight. Earlier today on social media, you said you believe this was a coup attempt. Are you standing by that tonight?
Yeah, I think by a lot of definitions used in political science, what we see today looks very much like a coup. Yeah, you might want to call it an insurrection. That's probably a bit more diplomatic. But regardless of what term somebody wants to use, what we've seen today is something that we have never seen before in the United States.
Dave, let you chime in here. You've seen this unfold throughout the day and into the evening. What are your thoughts?
Well, honestly, this is an embarrassment to the American political system when you turn around and you have a situation going on like this. There is absolutely no reason for any group of people to go and storm the U.S. Capitol, none whatsoever. And the thing that we have to keep in mind here is this: we have to have a peaceful transfer of power, and when we don't have that going on, it leads to a question of whether or not we've got a level of stability. Now, have things been done to bring some level of law and order? The mayor of Washington, D.C. requested that a National Guard be done. The president did that immediately. We are beginning to see that, but you know, this is one of those places where when we were talking back in the summer about defunding the police, we're glad that they're not defunded right now.
Dave, don't do the defund the police thing, because this has nothing to do with defund the police. Shouldn't even be a
No,
part
I'm glad that we funded the police and have them in Washington, D.C. right now.
You never even said that. You know what? I sit here as a 35-year-old black man pissed off. I see white people go storming the Capitol and taking over the Capitol. The first time it's happened since 1812, 1816, when the Capitol was burned down by the British. Can you imagine if that was a Black Lives Matter protest? I've seen people who look like me, that come from communities that look like mine, killed at the hands of law enforcement for much less. Kurt, you're a professor, you know that. And the bottom line is we have people like Donald Trump who are pouring gasoline and kerosene on these people and on their thinking to get them to come to the Capitol. You had someone posing in Nancy Pelosi's office, taking a picture, sitting back, chilling, as if that's okay. They broke windows out of the Capitol. They chased around law enforcement around the Capitol. The same people who scream law and order. It pisses me off to sit here tonight to think about, you know what, if that was Antoine Seawright there, my mother possibly would have been coming to claim my body. It's not right. It's not okay. And any Republican or anybody who sits around and say, oh, this is just Donald Trump, it's not that bad, Democrats are making a big deal, then you have some serious self-evaluating to do.
Well, if you listened to what I said a moment ago, Antoine, I said absolutely nothing
what
about the
does
fact.
defund the police have to do with this?
Because I'm glad the police are there.
You could have easily.
The police are there.
The
National Guard was there.
Said, you know what, this is wrong. But you had.
I did say that it was wrong. I said straight up it was wrong, Antoine.
You want to throw out a red meat talking point.
No, what it is, folks.
Saying, you know what it is, folks.
We say that it's wrong because it is wrong, and we have to recognize the fact that across the board, we know that this is the wrong thing to do. Kirk's got a point. Any other time that be considered, this would be considered insurrection, and that is in itself wrong. But when we have Richmond's Capitol that's being defaced, when we have the police cars of Columbia being defaced and burned in the city of Columbia, why aren't we having just as loud of a protest about that? When we have courthouses that are being accosted every single day in Portland, why are we not having an issue about that? When whole entire communities in Portland are being taken over by anarchists, why are we not having the same type of insurrection argument about that?
All right. Kurt, I want to bring you back into the conversation now, because
I feel like I need to referee sort of my two friends over here a little bit.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion throughout the evening about impeachment here over the last 2 weeks and invoking the 25th Amendment. What's your take on either one of those?
So, first of all, I think the likelihood that either of those actually happens is incredibly small. The impeachment one is probably smaller than the 25th Amendment, simply because of the fact that the process for impeachment is so involved. You have both chambers of Congress that have to step in and weigh in independently, as opposed to invoking the 25th Amendment, which can happen much more quickly. But I think more importantly, for any of those actions to really matter, I think it involves Republican leaders to step forward and actually take some kind of action. Otherwise, this is just going to look like another partisan stunt. And between those two, The 25th Amendment is only invoked if the vice president, along with a majority of the cabinet, writes a letter to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove the president's authority as commander-in-chief, as head of the executive branch. That's an action that I think, if Republican leaders are willing to take it, would actually make people sit up and take notice. But again, I think the likelihood is relatively small.
Kurt, you know that's not going to happen. You know why? Because they support domestic terrorist acts like tonight. And they do what Dave just did. They pivot and try to talk about, oh, well, burning down the courthouse. Every time one of these incidences happen, for instance, when I can't remember the state, it was these Donald Trump supporters who show up and position themselves as if they are part of what Republicans would call the mob. And then we later find out they're Trump supporters. We later go trace their social media pages. And they show up to incite violence and cause all these problems, and then you paint as the Democrats. Instead of just saying, you know what, it's wrong. This is not who we are. They cuddle and play footsie to the BS and to the games, and that's why a lady was killed tonight, Kurt. Somebody's mother died tonight because people play games. And they don't want to call things what they are, and they cuddle and play footsie to the BS, and that's the problem. And the people who do that are part of the reason why we're here in this space tonight having this conversation.
Well, if you recall back, if we rewind this and we watch this from the very beginning, you do hear that we call out the fact that the president did something that incited this. We have actually said that. I actually did say that, Antoine, that any action of this nature, Antoine, goes against everything that we all know, that we hear on Sunday morning, that you love God with everything you've got and you treat other people the way you want to be treated. Everything in the book comes down to that, and we all agree with that. And when we don't see that happening,
so why
which we did not see.
The police are talking about courthouses and all this. We're talking about tonight.
I'm talking about a movement and an attitude, Antoine, that has been pervasive across America for at least the last year, that has culminated in tonight. Listen, I went to visit my son in the Marines, and I drove to Richmond, Virginia. I wanted to see the Capitol. Do you know how many F words were spray painted on buildings around the Capitol in Richmond, Virginia?
So who did it, Dave? Do you know who did it?
Well, do you want to know what letters? I don't know what I don't.
Right.
But
So
I do know who burned. I do know who burned.
As if that was Democrats.
I do
That's
know
what you
who
did. That's what you
burned
did.
police cars in
Who?
Columbia,
Who
South
did?
Carolina.
Who did?
Let's go back and play the video.
Who did? Who
Play
did?
the video.
Who did it?
Let's
Tell-
ask Chip. Let's ask.
Dave, tell us who did it. Because I don't know. Tell
So
us who did it.
if I could,
Because I don't know who did it.
That's a great question, and that needs to be prosecuted appropriately,
Fine,
just like these people do too.
But if I could, what we're talking about tonight is the peaceful transfer of power.
Absolutely.
All the other stuff I agree is important, but we're talking about the peaceful transfer of power, which is the bedrock of this democracy. And what we saw today was a president of the United States get in front of his crowd and incite that crowd to storm the Capitol.
What were the
Kurt,
phrases that he used? Did he say attack the Capitol?
No, but he said go to the Capitol, and he said you need to be strong. That is the only way that we're going to win. Right, but we know that there's a lot of code that gets spoken. There's a lot of symbols that get tossed around. There's a lot of gaslighting that happens, and so we had a president that told his followers, go to the Capitol, be strong, and demand that they overturn the election. And so what we saw now was an extension of that call from the President of the United States.
All right, guys. Look, I'm going to have to wrap things up there. Kirk Randazzo with USC, thank you so much. Antoine, Dave, as always, guys, thank you for your time as well.